Uh, Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I have to confess, it is the first time that I am speaking in a terrace in front of this beautiful landscape and with the planes landing in the airport. Look, Mark Twain once said, history doesn't repeat itself, but often it rhymes. And that's true. When I look back 75 years ago, when NATO was founded, I see that history rhymes a lot. 75 years ago, which was the big event in 1949? The big event was the blockade of Berlin. For almost a year, the Americans' DC-3 planes were landing over the heads of people, and 2 million people was kept alive. Berlin was the front line between democracy and authoritarian regimes. Today, this front line is Ukraine. In Ukraine, the future of the security of Europe will be decided. 75 years ago, we responded following the advice of Winston Churchill when he said, there is nothing that the Russians admire much as a strength, and there is nothing that they less respect, which is weakness, especially military weakness. So appeasement doesn't work with them. 75 years ago, our response was unity. The United States and the free and democratic states of Europe committed to collective defense, and we created NATO. But when the Cold War ended, we believe that freedom, peace, and democracy were not only the only possible future, but they were given for granted. They didn't need to be defended. And today, President Biden has said that freedom and peace cannot be taken for granted. They come with a price. Then we look at Putin butchering Chechnya in 1999, intervening in Syria. We reacted mildly when he invaded Georgia in 2008, and half-hearted when we see him annexing Crimea in 2014. We didn't want to see what was obvious, that Putin wants Russia to dominate its neighborhood again. Putin has not given up on Russia's imperialist ambitions. And that is the problem. Russia still behaves as an empire. And Putin wants to rebuild the empire, be it the Tsar Empire or the Soviet Empire. And then finally, in February 2022, when they started bombing Kyiv, we woke up to this unhappy reality, and we found ourselves poor prepared. That's another fact. We woke up, and then we realized that we were not prepared to face this challenge. Yes, history rhymes. 75 years ago, the Soviet Union emerged as a threat to freedom and democracy in Europe. And we responded with unity and strength. And today, the only thing that we can do is to follow the same path. And I am happy to say here in Washington that the Europeans, we have started rebuilding our defense capabilities, increasing our defense budgets, and raising our defense industry, rebuilding a stronger capacity. Just an example, just one figure. In the last 3 years, the total expenditure in Europe has increased by 30%. And this year we will be reaching almost, in average, altogether, 2%, 1.9. It's not enough, but it's much better, and it's growing. And for us, it's a matter of a strategic responsibility. We know, we are fully aware, we are convinced that we have to improve the capacity of our armies and our defense in order to be able to defend ourselves. Not as an alternative to NATO. There is not alternative to NATO for the territorial defense of Europe, but to make NATO stronger and to share the burden. On the last 5 years, a lot has been done. Something that looked unthinkable has become a reality. For example, providing military equipment to a country at war, something that we never did. And seen from here, from Washington, this may sound unremarkable. This may sound logical. But for us, for the European Union, who is not a military alliance, although we want to build a common security and defense policy, this was revolutionary. And you always remember, 2 weeks before the starting of the war, I was in Donbass, and I was meeting with the Prime Minister of Ukraine. And he told me, we know that when the Russians will attack us, because they will attack us, you will not send your young people to fight in Kyiv. But are you going to help us to resist? Are you going to provide us with the arms that we need in order to defend our country? And at that time, I couldn't give him a concrete answer. I was not sure. But happily, that's what we have done. Yes, seen from Washington, it looks normal. Since the European Union is a revolution, a mental revolution for the European Union. And now we are increasing our industrial capacity, incentivizing our industries, pulling resources together, developing jointly our capacities in order to face this challenge. And we know this requires more efficiency, more interoperability for our 27 different armies, and more predictability for the defense industry that needs to know which is going to be the future demand in order to justify the investments of today. And we know that defense industry will play an important role in the next future, because we understand that if we allow Putin's Russia to turn Ukraine in a second Belarus and to put a puppet government in Kyiv, we will pay a much higher price later. That Ukraine prevails is existential, is a requirement for our security. And we know that Russia has moved to a war economy, using what is called war Keynesianism to feed the war machine, boosting the economics through military expenditure. As a result, today the World Bank has upgraded Russia as a high-income country. But it hasn't come with an increase on the well-being of the Russian people, just the contrary. They have embarked in an industrial production. And we know that today, in this kind of war, industrial production, technological capacity is key in order to deliver missiles, artillery ammunition, anti-aircraft systems. And that's why I insist on this idea. We are boosting our defense industry by buying together, by increasing production capacity, by stimulating cooperation between European arms producers. I can cite some examples, but it's clear that, for example, in 1 year, we have multiplied by 2 our capacity to produce ammunition, and by the end of this year, it will be 3 times bigger. We need to spend more, and to spend more Europeans. If we want the European states to increase their defense budget, and I think that it is exactly what the US is asking the Europeans, it also means that we have to produce more in Europe. And our defense initiatives are designed for that, to ramp up our production capacity, to make our industries bigger and more efficient. But this does not exclude US companies that are based in the EU and meet security conditions. We have a lot to learn from the US. And we have a lot to learn from Ukraine, too. In Ukraine, warfare is being revolutionized by technology. In February, I visited one of your factories where you are producing modern drones. And I saw how necessity powers innovation. Drones and electronic warfare made in Ukraine could become world leaders. We will open an innovation office in Kyiv. We will make cooperation between Ukrainian startups and European Union defense companies easier. We want the ideas to flow both sides. We will organize a continuous reach out with you. And remember, some days ago, you were in Brussels at this EU-Ukraine Industrial Forum to facilitate exchanges and matchmaking between European Union and Ukrainian companies. Yes, dear friends, history rhymes. And those with more industrial capacity and better technology ultimately will prevail. And I know that some of you may look at the European elections some weeks ago and look at the travels of one of our prime ministers and ask yourself, is Europe really committed to Ukraine defense in the long run? Is that a real commitment, not just empty words or pure rhetoric? Allow me that, in spite of whatever you could have heard on these last hours, the answer is yes. Not only because it is the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do, but also because it is in our own interest. Because on defending Ukraine, we are defending the European security, and it is the only way to achieve peace. I know that someone says that he's looking for peace. Well, all of us want peace. And in particular, the Ukrainians, they want peace more than anyone else. But what kind of a peace? What kind of a peace? I know how to finish the war. If we stop supporting Ukraine, the war will be over very quickly, because Ukraine cannot defend itself without our support. The war will stop, yes, but how? Which will be the final result of the process? What kind of an end? Which will be the fate of the Ukrainian people if Putin goes to Kyiv, puts there a puppet government? Which will be the result of this story if Ukraine has to surrender? Putin will not stop in Kyiv. And those who blame the global powers for this war should be courage enough in order to name and blame the ones who started this war. They have a name. It's not global powers. It's called Putin. And we certainly regret that people are dying. But the Ukrainian soldiers are fighting and dying because they are defending his country who has been aggressed. Looking for peace doesn't make us to forget that there is an aggressor and an aggressed. And we cannot put both of them in the same level. We know who is the aggressor. He is the same one that launches missiles against civilian targets every day. Yesterday against our largest children's hospital in Kyiv. Yes, we want peace. How not? But only a peace that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and provides security guarantees. Only that would be a real peace. Peace is something more than the absence of war. And everything else, a ceasefire, will only allow Russia to rearm and attack again. The truth is that only when Russia will accept to stay within its borders, it will stop being a threat to their neighbors and for the whole Europe. And for that we need unity and strength. It is the only recipe to deter an aggressor. It was true 75 years ago. It's true now. And I am happy to have heard a moment ago to President Biden to say that Russia cannot prevail. For that, we have to increase our industrial capacity, putting more money on the table, more technological development. We did that during the Euro crisis. We did that during the pandemic. We will do it again to rebuild our defense. But allow me to remind you that the awakening of Europe, as much needed as it is, should not imply that the US should rest easy. Allow me to say to you that the 6 months spent by the Congress to discuss US military support to Ukraine, yes we do, no we don't, we finally do, has come with a bill in terms of human lives losses, has come with a bill in terms of weakening the capacity of Ukraine to defend itself. We have to overcome this kind of discussions. All of us, in both sides of the Atlantic, we have to join our forces in order to fight against the challenge that Russia represents. Today, as it was 75 years ago. And only unity today, as it was 75 years ago, could save Europeans first and democracy and freedom around the world. Thank you.